Katsin and Romit in the earlier session, you can see the amount of work they are doing. Romit is here, or is he? Here. Where here? Okay. So your presentation also was almost like a PhD Viva presentation. So it's a lot to task. It's a lot to absorb in a short period. So I really must congratulate the effort. And I know this is almost they are doing it like in mission mode, And of course, Prabhu is helping them. It's, you have to keep at it because this is at one level seems like a very abstruse and complex. In fact, Kathleen also said in one of her comments that it is a very complex, even the exercise that she was trying to describe. And then to relate it to people, and you were saying in our private conversation, sometimes people have this wrong perception or their emotional response or not able to appreciate. So this is a very hard. You guys have taken the hardest possible projects, but there is no other way except to keep on persisting. And the most important thing about Dr. Das is incredible optimism. करते रहो, लगे रहो kind of a thing, and that too with a smile. Okay. So congratulations, and I'm happy to get it today. So actually, my comments are going to be generic, but I realized that what Catherine has done is focused on the case study. I mean, this subject is very. What is the session? The session is about blue accounting and environmental economics. It's an accounting concept incorporating something which is not in mainstream economics, which is environmental considerations or environmental calculations. But what she spoke about is much in-depth case study of the urban core. I'm just kind of guessing under some. I mean, some of your thing, of course, of course, and I don't know if any of people know that she's a physics graduate. So, after physics coming into this field is, quite a journey for you. So, let me just make a few generic remarks for the sake of, because I'm sure students and all people who have a general interest like to listen to these remarks. So, in the earlier session, and silt control, and one of the mentioned, I think, was floods, the urban floods. So here is one data point. I believe that the Pune Municipal Corporation, the local authorities, a couple of years ago, spent 900 crores on flood control. It was an episode in just 1 year or a few months. Of course, that's really the power areas. I don't know, some in this region. So it's a huge amount for a city to spend 900 crores is not a small number. Why? Because despite all kinds of regulations and control, you're not supposed to set up construction activity or not supposed to establish but the relentlessness of urban development, urbanization is such that they've come very close and rain, and that you have this volatile rainfall situation. Then you have to do this disaster management. But in just 1 year, they ended up having to spend 900 crores. Now, if you had done this kind of accounting, that how much money, she said something about how much is saved and how much is not spent, something like that, great opportunity cost. So in your accounting, if you had factored that in, then you will be aware and you'll be prepared for such things. Otherwise, it's always spending post facto, and that too, then your fiscal deficit goes. So that's an example, very recent, I thought I should mention. It's very relevant. So while we talk about UDA, underwater domain awareness, and our person is from the Navy, so we think a bit of security, but actually, if you look at the topics that we are covering, they cover everything. We are talking about governance, we are talking about fiscal situation, we are talking about livelihoods, and we are talking about civilian issues. So it's no longer just restricted only to security or military. It's a very broad subject.
Security systems can take care of themselves. We have to look at it.
Yes, exactly. But it has a bearing on all aspects of our life. The second example, I'd like to give you is the fact why this accounting is important from in the economics framework. Of course, General Pandey in the morning, I think, mentioned, maybe indirectly referred to the fact that What does not get measured cannot be managed. This is a very big principle. It's like a cliche almost. So you have to measure it, which means you have to account for it. You have to have it in your accounting books, in your balance sheet. So if you don't measure it, so look at the way how it's measured. So if you cut a tree and then you sell it as timber, the value of that cutting becomes positive value to the economy because you're cutting down a tree and you're making timber and the timber is used. Is that all there is to it? Of course not. So that is one drawback of the conventional way we measure GDP. And this is something, this is the starting point of the, I mean, when she says blue accounting, let's forget the word blue for the timing. In general, accounting and environmental economics is that to account for everything. Now the only giving you a timber for your furniture. It's actually giving you many other services, carbon sequestration services, then holding the soil together in flood prevention services. Then of course in 44 degrees centigrade giving us shade. I mean, I can only use my imagination. I'm sure there are 100 other examples. How has that been factored in? I'm just giving a very simple example. So that is why this accounting framework is important. And it's not easy, by the way. I mean, just the deeper you think, there's so many things you have to, but we have to make a start somewhere. We have not made a start. To this day, the GDP concept as we know it today is probably 60, 70 years old, or maybe 80 years old. It's a very modern thing. It wasn't there during the time of Adam Smith, except who's considered to be father of modern economics. It wasn't there in the time of David Ricardo. And we simply have not come to grips with the fact that it needs to include many more things. Not because we don't know, but we are not agreeing on the methodology. So Dr. Das's and his team's effort is actually a push more and more persuasion. Let's start finally incorporating these things. Every year you hear from the finance minister's budget that we need to have impute some value to the kind of work that women do at home. You know, typically women at work do unpaid work. So very fancy way of saying that you take care of the children, take care of the house, you do cooking, and you take care of the elderly parents, and you do social service, but you don't get none of this work is for pay. So therefore, it's absent in GDP, and women's participation in the workforce, labor force, is because of this definition is very, very low. India is so low that it's actually lowest in G20, even lower than Saudi Arabia at one time. So this is something that is a big hard topic of debate nationally. But also, one of the reasons is that because this doesn't reflect in GDP. Does that mean we should ignore it? Of course not. But how should we measure it? That's where the discussion comes in. So sorry, Catherine, I'm actually broadening the scope of your discussion to points perhaps which are not directly related to very specifics of the Baldwin case you made. But I thought it's important to emphasize the importance of this incorporate. Then similarly, the drawback of GDP. So this is the unaccounted for valuable services, whether it's the tree or whether she said mangroves, or whether it is the work of the housewife. Sorry, I'm saying housewife, it can be house husband also. There are the unaccounted for positive, but then negatives also. Just like this is the drawback that GDP fails to capture these services, but GDP also captures services which we don't want. Suppose there is an, the Pune police services, they run a service called Bharosa. Does anybody know about Bharosa? At least one person, elderly and women. Yeah, it's mainly for women. So, because if there's an increase in crime, even in a safe city like Pune, women should feel safe going alone at night and so on. So there's a Bharosa cell. So now they have to open more Bharosa cells. They have to recruit more people. They have to install more CCTV cameras. And in the meantime, private societies, buildings, they have their own private security guards, gated communities, then all kinds of biometric entrance, entry, exit. All this is, by the way, increasing GDP. So जितना crime बढ़ेगा, जितना crime का chance बढ़ेगा, उतना GDP बढ़ेगा. So that I'm just giving you examples. So don't think that by missing out on the good things in GDP, we're missing out something. But we are also capturing something in GDP, which is something I'm not sure. उससे society का कल्याण बढ़ता है क्या, welfare बढ़ता है? if there's more crime and more CCTV camera installation, do you think GDP will go up? We will become third largest GDP in the world. But is that what we want?
Somebody has to see the camera. That is the problem.
So that's a later problem. That is, even if you have all the CCTV camera, nobody is watching those strategies. Maybe sometimes that it's a CR case, somebody is watching. But that's one example. Another example is, if you go to Delhi today, almost every home which is somewhat upper class or slightly higher middle class, they have 1, 2, 3, 6 air purifiers. Every bedroom has one air purifier. Then other people who can't afford air purifier, they are coughing all the time, so they take some medicine. कोई antihistamine ले रहा है, कोई सब injection ले रहा है. Then so increase in medicines, increase in medical services, increase in air purifiers. All this is adding to GDP. So Delhi will become a very fast-growing GDP center of the country. Is this what we want? So I can give you many examples. Third last example is that for the last 4.5 years, almost 5 years now, there's been a war in Ukraine. Okay, we thought the Russians said we'll go there in 1 week, 2 weeks, it'll be over. Now it's 5 years. We also have a war going on now in Iran. Every few days, not maybe few hours, we say abhi ho gaya ceasefire. But it's still going. It's not over. Nobody's saying it's over. Then in Gaza, it's now what, 3 years, 2 years. There have been bombing. Now, all this situation is going to lead to, of course, there have been lots of lives lost and horrendous misery, but it's going to lead to a lot of demand for reconstruction. New house, again, those houses have to be rebuilt, roads have to be constructed, community centers, schools. All that is going to add to GDP. So then let's have more wars. GDP padega. So I'm just giving examples while on one hand, Catherine's presentation and this whole session is about how when you're trying to measure the blue economy, you're missing out. If you just count, she gave some examples in the context of if you just count the number of fish caught or something, but you're not taking into account service flow out of, but she also warned about the erosion of assets where that also gets counted as GDP, but that's actually negative in the ecological capital. So that is all unaccounted for services which are potentially positive. Here are services which we get accounted, but which may not be what we want. So the task, Dr. Das, is actually quite complex. So, with that in background, let me just quickly make some comments now. So it's of course excellent presentation, Catherine. We care, like you said, right now we only account for 4%. The blue economy is only 4% of GDP, but it is a highly big underestimate because of many marine ecosystems like coastal protection due to mangroves, carbon sequestration, nutrient cycling. These are not captured. So therefore, the question is now how to. The big question in this session is that how to close the gap. What is not counted. Secondly, when you calculate GDP, all these things which are not priced, which are not market transactions, you count it as free. So the ocean is free, ocean services. Only the fish catch shows up in GDP. But the other thing, the ocean services don't. So I think she has a word for it, total ocean services or something. Value, total ocean value. Yeah. So we need to. He mentioned that we need to account for this asset reduction, asset drawdown, as she call it. And mangroves, seagrass beds, salt marshes, they all sequester carbon. So in this now there's much more awareness among the Millennium Goals. I think climate change has found so carbon sequestration is now well acknowledged to be a very valuable service. I was surprised to know that mangroves per hectare or per square kilometer actually sequester carbon much more effectively than forests. This is, I didn't know, it's by a factor, very significant factor. So that has to be captured. That's another measurement gap. And then, of course, you mentioned the MAHASAGAR, but Sagarmala program also is also about the port-led development. This Vadhavan port, which is coming up in northern Maharashtra, near Gujarat border, they all assume that this development study will assume that GDP will services will grow, GDP will grow. But the blue accounting is the framework which will give you the gap between. I think she has presented it very validly. I mean, very in a very detailed manner. What is missed out and what is made. Of course, the chief minister and everybody is very happy because when this comes up, they only focus on how much investment will go up in port infrastructure, lakhs of crores, how much employment will be created, how much logistics and trucking business will come. But I have not seen this thing given as much prominence as perhaps is required. I didn't hear you, Catherine, mention about any financing, how this financing will be done. I think it's there in your write-up about these blue bonds, right?
Yes,
So
sir.
I don't know if you mentioned the blue bond scheme, because that has a huge potential, I think, because given our coastline, 7,000 kilometers, the idea of a blue bond, then I believe there's only one example internationally, which is from Seychelles. But whether there is scope for India. So that's about all that I have to say. The biofouling thing I'm not going to mention because that's a very important. The next session is about on that. I wonder where the word fouling came up because this is something that we defoul means we degrade, right? It has nothing positive about it, no? Or I don't know whether it's both positive and negative. But biofouling is uh, the economics linked to biofouling is that apparently an estimated $150 billion of increased fuel consumption globally and hull maintenance is because of biofouling. So we can save up to $150 billion if you focus on that. So this is a direct economic cost. And I'm sure there is a lot of indirect economic benefit from biofouling initiatives. So this also again the blue accounting framework will capture. And of course, then the fisheries valuation. We have, by the way, this I just spent one last couple of minutes. There used to be a lot of debate on tobacco. So now, of course, the three stars have come into the limelight. Shah Rukh Khan and Ajay Devgan and that actually Tiger Shroff, Tiger. They have come into the limelight thanks to Mr. Tukaram Munde. But tobacco is a very interesting example because tobacco provides livelihood to 44 lakh farmers. I don't know what the number is now. There are regions of India like Guntur district, Nipani, northern Karnataka. They are tobacco growers, and those farms. Tobacco is a hardy crop. Unlike less rainfall, it grows in dry-fed region. Doesn't and has a good value because of course tobacco and worldwide, at least in developing countries, and I think in India also, and possibly in countries like Korea, Japan, tobacco consumption is increasing, cigarette consumption. Of course, in India, it's a very strange phenomenon, 80-20. 80% is consumed in the form of tobacco or gutka, only 20% in the form of cigarettes, which actually have huge amount of taxation, including GST. The reason I bring it up to you is that whenever there are anti-tobacco campaigns, you have to worry about the farmers. In fisheries, it's ulta. Fisheries is 7 million. There are estimated 7 million, right, Dr. Das? In 70 lakh fisher folk. So when we talk about Bardwan or we talk about the Sea Link bridge in Mumbai or the coastal road and all that, of course it affects. So it's a negative example of the sense that it's seen as a positive infrastructure development but it affects fisheries livelihoods, fisher folk livelihoods. So there also you have to weigh that, the trade-offs. I think Catherine also said that trade-offs are made sharper. So that's also in when it comes to fisheries valuation, the in capturing all the values. And so finally, I just want to say that this is something, this blue accounting framework is part of a wider initiative to include all kinds of accounting of ecological services and environmental aspects into mainstream GDP calculation, so that we get a more accurate value of increase in, when you say increase in GDP, it should really reflect increase in social welfare. If the GDP is increasing only by increasing CCTV cameras and police expenditure, that is not a genuine increase in aggregate consumer or citizens' welfare. So blue accounting aspects cover this marine aspect, but this is part of a wider framework called ecological services, and there also a lot of effort is going on. And finally, of course, what General Pandey said in the morning in his opening remarks, he said ultimately what you guys are doing has three major elements. So it has the security element in terms of national security or security aspects. Then it has the livelihood aspect, example is fisheries, water and port. And thirdly, it has sustainability aspect, so environmental sustainability. That what you are taking away from nature, are you replenishing enough so that people, the unfortunate victims, you may call it, are the people who are not even born. They don't have a voice in this room. They don't have blogs. They don't have Instagram accounts. They don't even vote because they're not even born. उनको क्या पता है? So sustainability is basically taking care of those people. So thank you for the opportunity. Thank you very much.